I'm Ethan, 34, and 3 months ago I was diagnosed with aggressive lymphoma. When I told my family, my sister Kimberly laughed and said, "Maybe dying will make you interesting." For years, I've been their financial backbone, paying for everything from my parents' mortgage to my sister's lavish lifestyle. That day, something inside me snapped. I decided it was time they learned what life without me would be like. So I canceled their credit cards, shut off their utilities, and let foreclosure do the rest. Before I continue my story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up to toxic family. Growing up, our family dynamic was always crystal clear. I was the quiet, reliable son who never caused trouble, while my sister Kimberly was the golden child who could do no wrong. My parents, Gerald and Susan, never tried to hide their favoritism. Kimberly got the praise, the parties, the presents, and the passes when she messed up. I got responsibilities, expectations, and disappointed sighs when I couldn't solve everyone's problems. By the time I was 10, I had already learned to make myself useful rather than try to be loved. I excelled in school, particularly in math and computer science, because it was something I could control. My report cards full of A's barely received acknowledgement, while Kimberly's C- grades were celebrated with ice cream because, at least she passed. I worked hard through high school, earned a scholarship to a good state university, and graduated with honors in software engineering. While I was building my career, Kimberly was bouncing between college majors, never completing any of them. She started a photography business that failed within months, then a fashion blog that never gained traction, then decided she wanted to open a boutique with no business plan. Each venture required startup money, which mysteriously became my responsibility. My parents retired in their early 60s with woefully inadequate savings. Dad had worked as a high school history teacher, and Mom had been an administrative assistant at a small insurance company. They had some pension income but had refinanced their house multiple times to help Kimberly or to fund vacations they couldn't afford. When the 2008 recession hit, they lost nearly half of their retirement investments and never recovered. That's when my role as the family provider officially began. I was 26, finally making good money at a tech company, and had just received my first significant bonus. I had planned to use it as a down payment on a condo, but instead, it went to catching up my parents' mortgage, which was 3 months behind. "It's just temporary, son," my dad assured me. "Just until we get back on our feet." That temporary situation turned into a permanent arrangement. Every month, I transferred money to cover their mortgage. Then it was their property taxes. Then their utilities. Then their car payments. Then their credit card bills, which mysteriously kept growing despite their claims of cutting back expenses. Meanwhile, Kimberly had her own set of financial emergencies. Her car broke down and needed replacement. Her apartment flooded, and she needed first and last month's rent plus security deposit for a new place. She got engaged to Troy, a music producer, who never seemed to produce any music, and suddenly I was being pressured to contribute to her dream wedding. When that relationship inevitably imploded 2 months before the wedding, I still somehow had to pay the non-refundable venue deposit. By my early 30s, I was spending over $5,000 per month supporting my family. My parents' mortgage, their utilities, their medications, their car payments, their property taxes, their homeowner's insurance, and their credit card bills. Kimberly's rent on an apartment far nicer than mine, her car payment on a BMW she insisted she needed for appearances, her utilities, her phone bill, and her perpetually maxed-out credit cards. I tried setting boundaries occasionally. Once, I suggested Kimberly get a roommate to reduce her expenses. "You don't understand," she whined. "I need my space for creativity. Besides, you make plenty of money. It's not like you have anyone else to spend it on." That was another consistent theme. My family regularly commented on my lack of a serious relationship, as if my single status was a character flaw rather than a circumstance partly created by my financial obligations to them. How could I consider marriage or children when I was already supporting 3 adults? The first symptoms appeared so gradually I almost didn't notice. Unusual fatigue that I attributed to overwork. Night sweats I blamed on stress. A persistent cough I thought was just allergies. When I found the lump on my neck, I told myself it was probably nothing but made a doctor's appointment anyway. My primary care physician, Dr. Thomas, didn't share my optimistic self-diagnosis. He ordered blood tests, then a CT scan, then a biopsy. Each test led to more serious conversations, culminating in a meeting where he used the word, lymphoma, for the first time. "We need to be aggressive with this type," Dr. Thomas explained, showing me the scan results. "The good news is that it's treatable, and you're young and otherwise healthy. But you need to prepare yourself. The treatment will be intensive, expensive, and you'll need a strong support system. Even with my excellent insurance, my out-of-pocket costs would likely exceed $200,000. I would need to reduce my work hours during treatment, meaning less income. For the first time in years, I would need help rather than being the helper." As I drove home from that appointment, I allowed myself a small, hopeful thought: maybe this would be the wake-up call my family needed. Maybe they would finally step up, support me emotionally, perhaps even financially. Maybe this crisis would transform our relationship into something more balanced, more reciprocal. I was about to learn just how wrong I could be. I spent the entire Saturday before the family meeting cleaning my house. Not that it needed much cleaning since I lived alone and was naturally organized, but the activity gave me something to focus on besides the conversation ahead. I changed the sheets in the guest bedroom where my parents sometimes stayed, vacuumed every corner, and even alphabetized my spice rack. In the kitchen, I prepared a pot of my mom's favorite beef stew, the recipe she had taught me when I was 12. The familiar process was comforting, methodically chopping vegetables and browning meat as I rehearsed what I would say. I set the dining table with the good dishes, the ones usually reserved for holidays, and put fresh flowers in the center. My family was supposed to arrive at 5 p.m. By 5:30, I was checking my phone to see if they'd sent a message about running late. By 5:45, I was calling them. My mother answered on the fourth ring. "Oh, Ethan, we're just leaving now." Kimberly had a nail appointment that ran long, and you know how she gets if she's rushed. I did know. Kimberly's time was valuable, mine was expendable. They finally arrived at 6:20, complaining about traffic. The stew had been simmering too long and was starting to stick to the bottom of the pot. "This house is so far out of the way," Kimberly said, dropping her designer purse on my couch. "I don't know why you couldn't have bought something closer to us." "Because I couldn't afford anything closer after paying your bills," I thought but didn't say. My father immediately headed for my liquor cabinet, pouring himself a generous whiskey without asking. My mother inspected the flowers on the table. "Carnations, Ethan? Really? They're such common flowers." I took a deep breath and suggested we sit down for dinner. As we ate, they dominated the conversation as usual. Dad complained about the neighbor's dog barking. Mom detailed her latest feud with her book club. Kimberly scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing us Instagram posts from people I didn't know. Finally, as they were finishing their food, I cleared my throat. "I asked you here today because I have something important to tell you," I began, my heart pounding. "I've been to several doctors over the past few weeks, and I've been diagnosed with lymphoma. It's a type of cancer." There was a moment of shocked silence. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father put down his whiskey glass. Kimberly looked up from her phone. "Cancer?" my mother repeated. "But you're so young." "What stage?" my father asked, surprisingly practical. "Stage 3, I replied. "It's advanced but treatable. I'll need to start chemotherapy next week." "Will you lose your hair?" Kimberly asked, the first question that apparently came to her mind. "Probably," I said. "But that's the least of my concerns right now." I explained the treatment plan Dr. Thomas had outlined. 6 months of intensive chemotherapy, possibly followed by radiation. The side effects would be significant: extreme fatigue, nausea, weakened immune system. I would need to reduce my work hours, possibly take a leave of absence if the side effects became too debilitating. Which brings me to the other part of why I wanted to talk to you, I continued. The treatment is expensive, even with insurance. And with reduced work hours, I'm going to have financial constraints for the first time in years. My father frowned, realization dawning on his face. What are you saying, Ethan? I'm saying that I need to focus on paying for my treatment and covering my own living expenses while I'm sick. I won't be able to continue supporting everyone financially, at least not at the same level. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. My mother's sympathetic expression hardened. My father's face flushed red. But what about our mortgage? My mother demanded. And the property taxes are due next month. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. I just can't manage it all right now. I need to prioritize my health. So you're just cutting us off? My father's voice rose. After everything we've done for you? I stared at him, momentarily speechless. What exactly had they done for me lately? I couldn't remember the last time they had even asked about my life before tonight. I'm not cutting you off completely, I explained. I can still help with some expenses, but you'll need to reduce your spending. Maybe consider downsizing the house, or Mom could look for part-time work. That's when Kimberly laughed. Not a nervous laugh or a sympathetic one. A cruel, dismissive laugh that cut through the tension like a knife. Maybe dying will finally make you interesting, she said, a smirk playing on her lips. I stared at her, unable to process what I just heard. Had my sister really just mocked my cancer diagnosis? In what world was that an appropriate response? The worst part wasn't even her comment. It was that my parents laughed too. Small, uncomfortable chuckles, but laughter nonetheless. Kimberly, that's not nice, my mother said, but her admonishment was undermined by her smile. What? I'm just saying what we're all thinking, Kimberly continued. Ethan's always been the boring one. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect budget. Maybe this will finally give him a personality. They continued discussing my illness as if it were a minor inconvenience in their lives rather than a potentially fatal condition in mine. The conversation quickly devolved into a negotiation about which of their expenses I would continue to cover. The BMW payment is non-negotiable, Kimberly insisted. I need reliable transportation. And we can't possibly cut back on the house, my mother added. Where would we put all our things? Not once did anyone ask how I was feeling. Not once did anyone offer to help with my medical appointments or household chores when I became too sick to manage them. Not once did anyone acknowledge the fear that had been my constant companion since the diagnosis. When they finally left 2 hours later, my father's parting words were, "Think about what we discussed, son. I'm sure you'll realize your family needs to come first." I stood in my doorway watching their car disappear down the street, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. A week passed without a single call or text from my family. I checked my phone constantly the first few days, thinking surely one of them would reach out, perhaps regretting their initial reaction. But my screen remained stubbornly notification-free. My first chemotherapy session fell on a Tuesday. I had arranged for a rideshare service to take me to and from the hospital, knowing I wouldn't be in any condition to drive afterward. As I sat in the treatment chair, needle in my arm and toxic chemicals flowing into my bloodstream, I scrolled through social media to distract myself. That's when I saw them, photos of my family at Virginia Beach, enjoying what appeared to be an impromptu vacation. Kimberly had posted a selfie with our parents at an oceanfront restaurant, captioned, "Spontaneous beach trip with the fam. #blessed #family time." The timestamp showed it was posted 2 hours ago, right around the time my oncologist had been explaining the potential complications of my treatment. Marcus, my closest friend from college, visited me the day after my first treatment. He found me huddled under blankets on the couch, alternating between chills and sweats, barely able to keep down water. "Jesus, Ethan," he said, surveying my pale face and the untouched soup on the coffee table. "Where's your family? Why are you alone right now?" I showed him the beach photos, too tired to explain the whole story. Unbelievable, he muttered, shaking his head. Then, with obvious reluctance, he added, "There's something else you should know. I didn't want to tell you, especially now, but I think you need to understand what you're dealing with." Marcus had run into my cousin Jake at a work event last week. After a few drinks, Jake had mentioned being at a party where Kimberly was openly mocking my cancer diagnosis, imitating what she imagined I would look like, bald and sick. According to Jake, she had referred to my illness as the most interesting thing about boring Ethan. The betrayal cut deep, but it also sparked something in me. If Kimberly could be so callous about my life-threatening condition, what else might she be capable of? The next day, feeling marginally better, I began investigating my financial records more thoroughly than I had in years. What I found shocked me to my core. There were credit card charges I didn't recognize on accounts I regularly paid off for my family. Designer clothes, spa treatments, even a weekend getaway to Nashville, all within days of my diagnosis. They were spending more, not less, despite knowing my situation. Digging deeper, I discovered 2 additional credit cards had been opened in my name within the past year, cards I had never authorized or received. Both were maxed out at their $10,000 limits. I checked my credit report and found my score had dropped nearly 100 points due to these accounts being behind on payments. My hands shaking with a combination of chemo's side effects and rage, I called the credit card companies and reported the fraud. The customer service representative asked several security questions, then informed me that the cards had been sent to my parents' address, not mine. The paperwork had been completed with my personal information, including my social security number, but the signature on the applications was clearly forged. My parents had stolen my identity. Further investigation revealed more betrayals. The house I had been making payments on for years, which I believed was an investment property in both my name and my parents', turned out to be solely in their names. They had removed me from the deed 3 years ago, but kept accepting my payments. The money I sent for their property taxes far exceeded the actual tax bill on their modest home. The most shocking discovery came when I called my cousin Jake directly. After confirming what Marcus had told me about Kimberly's party behavior, Jake hesitantly shared more family gossip. "Look, I've wanted to tell you this for years, but everyone said it would just cause problems," Jake began. "Kimberly has been telling the extended family that you're controlling and emotionally abusive. That you hold money over her head and make her beg for every penny. That you force your parents into dependency to satisfy your ego." I was stunned into silence. For years I had wondered why certain family members had become cold toward me, declining my invitations to dinner or making excuses to leave early when I attended family gatherings. Now it made sense. They thought I was the villain in this story. My next chemotherapy appointment came with more than physical side effects. Dr. Reynolds, my oncologist, noticed my elevated blood pressure and increased heart rate. "Stress can significantly impact your body's ability to handle treatment," he warned. "Is there something going on we should address?" I gave him a summarized version of my family situation. "Unfortunately, I see this more often than you might think," Dr. Reynolds said. "Cancer has a way of revealing people's true characters. Some rise to the occasion beautifully, others show their worst selves." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "But Ethan, you need to understand something. Stress is not just an emotional issue right now. It's a medical one. High stress levels can compromise your immune system, which is already being hammered by the chemotherapy. In other words, my family's behavior wasn't just hurting my feelings. It could potentially be making my cancer treatment less effective." That same week, I confided in Trevor, a coworker who had become a friend. I needed to explain my reduced hours and occasional sick days, and once I started talking, the whole story came pouring out. "Man, that sounds just like what happened to my cousin," Trevor said. "His family nearly bankrupted him before he got help. He worked with a financial advisor who specializes in these situations. Want me to connect you?" The financial advisor, Diane, couldn't hide her shock as I laid out the details of my financial entanglement with my family. She had me gather all my records, bank statements, credit reports, property documents, and text messages requesting money. In my 20 years doing this job, I've rarely seen a case this extensive, Diane admitted. Based on these records, you've given your family approximately $450,000 over the past 5 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. Nearly $500,000. A house. A retirement account. My children's college fund, if I'd ever had the chance to have children. Diane helped me document everything systematically. We created spreadsheets categorizing different types of support: housing, vehicles, education, daily expenses. We traced where the money had actually gone, which often wasn't where I'd been told it was going. A particularly disturbing discovery was a bank account in Kimberly's name where my parents had been depositing large portions of the money I sent them. Based on the withdrawal patterns, they had been funding Kimberly's lifestyle behind my back, beyond the direct support I already provided her. Social media provided even more evidence. While claiming financial hardship, Kimberly had been posting photos of expensive restaurant meals, designer clothing with tags still attached, and luxury spa weekends. All paid for with my money, while I lived frugally in a modest house, drove a 10-year-old car, and brought lunch to work to save money. My medical condition worsened as these discoveries piled up. My blood counts dropped dangerously low, forcing Dr. Reynolds to reduce my chemotherapy dosage. The cancer wasn't responding as well as expected, and he warned that if my condition didn't improve, we might need to consider more aggressive treatment options with even more severe side effects. It became increasingly clear that for my health, both financial and physical, something had to change. Drastically. Diane, my financial advisor, scheduled an extended session to develop a comprehensive plan for untangling my finances from my family's. This isn't just about money, she explained. It's about reclaiming your autonomy and protecting your future. Based on your medical situation, you need every resource focused on your recovery. She recommended I consult with an attorney, and connected me with Robert, who specialized in financial abuse cases. When we met, Robert reviewed my documentation with a grim expression. What we're looking at here goes beyond financial exploitation, he said. The identity theft alone is a felony offense. The unauthorized credit cards, the property deed manipulation, the misrepresentation of expenses, these are all legally actionable. I wasn't interested in pressing criminal charges against my own family, regardless of their behavior. However, Robert advised that documenting everything as if I might take legal action would strengthen my position when I implemented financial separation. Together with Diane and Robert, I created detailed spreadsheets of every financial interaction with my family. We categorized expenses, housing costs, vehicle payments, education expenses, credit card payments, cash transfers, and miscellaneous requests. The visualization of the data was shocking, revealing patterns I had been too close to see. For instance, my family's financial emergencies consistently coincided with my annual bonuses or salary increases. Somehow, they always seemed to know exactly when I had additional funds available. The correlation was too perfect to be coincidental, suggesting they had access to my financial information without my knowledge. Further investigation revealed Kimberly had a secret bank account where my parents deposited portions of the money I provided for their expenses. Bank statements showed regular transfers from this account to fund shopping sprees, salon visits, and weekend getaways with friends. Social media provided additional evidence. While claiming desperate need for my financial support, Kimberly regularly posted photos of luxury purchases. A new designer handbag the same week she told me she couldn't afford groceries. A weekend at a spa resort when she claimed her car needed urgent repairs. The deception was methodical and ongoing. On Robert's recommendation, I also began sessions with Dr. Mitchell, a therapist specializing in family dynamics and financial abuse. Initially skeptical about the term financial abuse, I came to understand that my situation was a textbook case. Financial abuse occurs when someone uses money to control or exploit another person, Dr. Mitchell explained. Your family has been using your sense of obligation and guilt to extract ongoing financial support, while giving nothing in return. The fact that they've escalated to identity theft shows how entitled they feel to your resources. Dr. Mitchell helped me understand the narcissistic family system I had been raised in, where my value was tied exclusively to my usefulness. I was the family's functional member, the reliable provider, not a person with needs and limitations of my own. My cancer diagnosis threatened this system by potentially transforming me from provider to someone requiring support. Their reaction to your illness wasn't just cruel, Dr. Mitchell observed. It was predictable within this family dynamic. You disrupted the established roles by becoming vulnerable, and their response was to reassert control by minimizing your condition and maintaining financial demands. Armed with this understanding, I worked with my support team to create a comprehensive plan for financial separation. The process would need to be swift and complete to prevent my family from finding workarounds or creating new avenues of exploitation. I consulted with my bank's security department about protecting my accounts and identity. I met with a mortgage broker to understand the implications of stopping payments on properties I had been financing. I prepared documentation for utility companies and service providers to remove my name from family accounts. Anticipating potential confrontation, I installed security cameras at my residence and created a protocol for documenting harassment. I set up new secure accounts at a different bank and established financial safeguards to prevent unauthorized access. The emotional preparation was equally important. Dr. Mitchell helped me script responses to the inevitable guilt trips, accusations, and manipulation tactics my family would deploy. We role-played difficult conversations and practiced maintaining boundaries in the face of emotional pressure. Between my second and third chemotherapy sessions, I experienced an unexpected moment of clarity. Despite the physical toll of treatment, I felt mentally stronger than I had in years. The fog of guilt and obligation that had clouded my judgment was lifting, replaced by a resolute determination to prioritize my own survival. The hospital social worker, Lisa, provided additional support, connecting me with cancer patient resources and practical assistance programs. She reinforced what Dr. Reynolds had told me about the medical importance of reducing stress during treatment. Your treatment plan isn't just chemotherapy, Lisa emphasized. It's adequate rest, proper nutrition, stress management, and emotional support. Right now, your family is actively undermining your medical care with their behavior. With my team's guidance, I created a detailed timeline for implementing financial separation. We scheduled each action strategically, ensuring all systems were in place before my family became aware of any changes. The execution date was set for 1 week later, immediately following my third chemotherapy treatment, when I would have a brief recovery period before the side effects intensified. As I reviewed the final plan with Diane and Robert, I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. This wasn't just about money, it was about my literal survival. Every dollar I continued to provide to my family was a dollar not available for my medical care. Every stressful interaction potentially compromised my treatment effectiveness. Are you ready for this? Diane asked gently. It won't be easy. They won't accept these changes without a fight. I'm ready, I confirmed. For the first time in my adult life, I'm choosing myself. The morning I implemented my plan, I woke before dawn. My hands trembled slightly, not from chemotherapy side effects but from the magnitude of what I was about to do. I prepared a simple breakfast, made a cup of tea, and sat at my kitchen table reviewing the detailed checklist one final time. My first call was to American Express, where I had a premium card with several authorized users, including both my parents and Kimberly. The customer service representative was efficient and professional as I requested immediate cancellation of all additional cards on my account. May I ask the reason for cancellation, Mr. Walker? She inquired. Unauthorized spending and financial abuse, I replied, using the term without hesitation for the first time. Next came Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, where similar conversations took place. By 9 a.m., every credit card my family had access to was deactivated. I then called my bank, where I had scheduled an appointment with the manager, Franklin. "We've prepared everything as you requested," Franklin assured me, sliding documents across his desk for my signature. "We'll freeze the joint accounts, transfer your funds to the new secure accounts, and implement the additional security protocols immediately." I filed identity theft reports for the unauthorized accounts opened in my name, providing the documentation Robert had prepared. The bank's fraud department assured me they would begin investigation procedures and work with credit bureaus to remove the fraudulent accounts from my record. By 11 a.m., I was at the mortgage company that held the loan on Kimberly's house, the one I had been paying for, under the impression it was an investment property partially in my name. The loan officer was sympathetic but direct. "Since your name isn't on the deed, despite the payment history showing you as the source of funds, we can only note that payments will no longer be coming from you," she explained. "The account holders will be notified that they are responsible for all future payments." I provided similar notification to all utility companies where I had been making payments but wasn't the account holder. For services where my name was on the account alongside family members, I had my name removed and all automatic payments cancelled. By early afternoon, I had changed all passwords and security questions on my financial accounts, email, and cloud storage. I set up credit monitoring and fraud alerts to prevent any new accounts from being opened in my name without my direct verification. The first indication that my family had discovered the changes came at 2:37 p.m., when my phone lit up with Kimberly's name. I let it go to voicemail, following the protocol Dr. Mitchell and I had established. Her message was exactly what we had anticipated. "Ethan, what the hell? My card just got declined at Nordstrom for no reason. Call me back immediately." Over the next hour, my phone exploded with notifications. 12 text messages from Kimberly, increasingly frantic and accusatory. 4 voicemails from my mother, moving from confused to tearful to angry. 3 missed calls from my father, who didn't leave messages but texted brief, ominous statements like, "We need to talk," and "This is unacceptable." Following my plan, I sent a single text message to each of them. "I am no longer able to provide financial support. All authorized cards and accounts have been closed. Please do not contact me further about financial matters. I need to focus on my health and treatment." This measured response only escalated their reactions. Kimberly called 17 more times in succession. When I didn't answer, my security camera alerted me to movement on my front porch. There she was, pounding on my door, visible on my phone screen through the security system. "I know you're in there, Ethan!" she shouted, her face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to us! Open the door right now!" I watched silently as she continued pounding and yelling, occasionally trying to peer through the windows. After 15 minutes of this behavior, with no response from me, she became more threatening. "You're going to regret this," she snarled at the door. "We're family. You don't get to just cut us off. Dad is furious. You have no idea what you've started." When it became clear she had no intention of leaving, I called the local police non-emergency line, explaining that an unwanted person was refusing to leave my property, and that I was a cancer patient concerned for my safety. Within 20 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up, and 2 officers approached Kimberly. Through my security camera, I watched their conversation. Kimberly gesticulated wildly, clearly trying to convince them that I was the problem. The officers remained calm, eventually escorting her to her car and ensuring she left the premises. One officer returned to my door to confirm I was safe, which I did through the security system's intercom feature, explaining that I was immunocompromised from chemotherapy and avoiding direct contact. The officer advised me to document all harassment for a potential restraining order if the behavior continued. I thanked him, already adding the video footage to the file Robert had helped me prepare. That evening, my parents called from various unknown numbers, trying to circumvent my call screening. I turned my phone to silent mode and focused on drinking enough water to stay hydrated, a constant challenge during treatment. The next morning, I received an alert that someone had attempted to access my medical records through the hospital's patient portal. The hospital's security protocols had prevented the access and flagged the attempt as suspicious. When I called to investigate, the security officer informed me that someone claiming to be my mother had tried to access my records, stating it was an emergency and I was incapacitated. We followed standard verification procedures, the security officer assured me. Since they couldn't provide the security answers you've established, no access was granted. I thanked them and requested additional notes on my account specifying that only I was authorized to access my medical information, regardless of claimed emergencies. 3 days after implementing my financial separation plan, the mortgage company called to inform me that the payment on Kimberly's house was late, and they had been unable to reach the account holders. I politely informed them that I was no longer involved with that property and couldn't provide any assistance. A week later, the first utility shutoff notice was delivered to my family's addresses. My monitoring systems showed multiple attempts to open new credit accounts in my name, all blocked by the fraud alerts I had established. Throughout this chaotic period, I focused intensely on my treatment and recovery. The reduced stress of no longer managing my family's finances had an almost immediate positive effect. My blood counts improved slightly, allowing Dr. Reynolds to adjust my chemotherapy dosage back to the optimal level. I formed connections with other patients in the treatment center, particularly Brian, who was battling a similar lymphoma with remarkable optimism. His wife, Andrea, often brought homemade soup for both of us, the first genuinely nurturing gesture I had experienced in years. "You're part of our cancer family now," Andrea insisted, arranging containers in my refrigerator. "Nobody fights alone on our watch." As my family's desperate attempts to regain access to my finances failed one by one, I experienced something unexpected. Relief, followed by the first stirrings of hope that I might actually survive, both financially and physically. 2 weeks after implementing my financial separation plan, the consequences for my family accelerated. The mortgage company sent the first formal foreclosure notice on Kimberly's house. My parents received disconnection warnings for their utilities and were forced to dip into their limited retirement savings to restore essential services. The extended family grapevine began buzzing with conflicting narratives. Several relatives reached out to me directly, having heard various versions of the situation from my parents and Kimberly. My cousin Jake, who had initially warned me about Kimberly's behavior, became my strongest ally. "They're telling everyone you had a mental breakdown because of your cancer diagnosis," Jake reported after a family dinner I hadn't been invited to. "They're saying you became paranoid and delusional, cutting them off without warning while they were trying to support you through your illness." Jake had defended me, sharing what he knew about their long-term financial exploitation. This had created a rift in the extended family, with some believing my parents' version and others questioning the sudden change in narrative. "Your mom slipped up," Jake added. "She mentioned something about credit cards being cancelled, and Uncle Peter asked why they had credit cards in your name in the first place. The whole conversation got really awkward after that." Meanwhile, Kimberly's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Without my support, she was forced to apply for entry-level retail positions, having no marketable skills or significant work history despite being 32 years old. Her social media accounts, once filled with photos of expensive restaurants and shopping halls, became increasingly desperate. "Can anyone recommend an affordable mechanic?" she posted. "Car making weird noises but need to keep it running for job interviews." A week later. "Looking for a roommate ASAP for my 2-BR apartment. Must be clean, quiet, and able to pay deposit immediately." My parents were facing their own crisis. The mortgage they had refinanced multiple times over the years was significantly underwater, meaning they owed more than the house was worth. Without my monthly contributions, they quickly fell behind on payments, pushing their house into pre-foreclosure status within 60 days. Their attempts to access my resources became increasingly creative and concerning. They contacted my health insurance company, claiming they needed information to help coordinate my care. They showed up at my workplace, telling the receptionist they were there to drive me to a medical appointment. Security escorted them from the building after I confirmed I had no knowledge of these plans. Kimberly's tactics turned more aggressive. She created social media posts implying I had abandoned my family during their time of need, carefully crafting her messages to paint herself as the victim while avoiding any direct accusations that could be proven false. She contacted mutual acquaintances, sharing a tearful, revisionist history of our family dynamic where she had always been my biggest supporter until my personality change during cancer treatment. Robert advised me to document every incident meticulously. When the harassment reached a certain threshold, he helped me file for a restraining order against Kimberly, whose behavior had become the most concerning. The court hearing was scheduled during a brief window between my treatment cycles. I arrived with Robert and a binder of evidence, including the security footage of Kimberly's front door confrontation, screenshots of repeated unwanted communications after being asked to stop, and documentation of her attempts to access my medical information and workplace. Kimberly arrived with our parents, all three dressed formally as if for church. She had clearly been coached, speaking softly and appearing wounded rather than displaying the rage I had documented. She claimed her repeated contacts were motivated solely by concern for my health, a narrative quickly undermined when the judge reviewed the actual content of her messages, which focused almost exclusively on money. Ms. Walker, the judge addressed Kimberly after reviewing the evidence. The court finds sufficient cause to grant this restraining order. You are to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Mr. Walker, his residence, and his place of employment. Any contact, direct or indirect, including through social media or third parties, will constitute a violation of this order. My parents glared at me as they escorted Kimberly from the courtroom, my mother mouthing, "How could you?" as they passed. I felt a momentary wave of guilt, quickly replaced by resolve when I remembered I had a chemotherapy session scheduled for the following morning, which none of them had offered to drive me to. As my treatment progressed, my medical team noted encouraging improvements. The combination of reduced stress and consistent treatment was producing results. At my 3-month assessment, Dr. Reynolds reported that the tumors had decreased by nearly 40%. "Whatever changes you've made in your life," he said, reviewing my latest scans, "keep making them. Your body is responding remarkably well." My friendship with fellow patient Brian deepened during this period. Unlike my family, Brian and his wife Andrea demonstrated what genuine support looked like. When I mentioned having trouble keeping food down after treatment, Andrea appeared the next day with a variety of gentle, homemade soups frozen in individual portions. When I struggled with fatigue, Brian introduced me to the meditation technique that had helped him conserve energy. Most surprisingly, Brian's family embraced me without question. His parents invited me to Sunday dinners, his sister called to check on me between treatments, and his teenage nephews shoveled my driveway after a snowstorm without being asked. This chosen family showed me what I had been missing my entire life: support that came without conditions or expectations of repayment. The contrast made my biological family's behavior even more glaring. 5 months after I implemented the financial separation, my family's circumstances had changed dramatically. Kimberly had been forced to move into a small apartment after foreclosure proceedings on her house were completed. My parents had moved in with my father's cousin temporarily, their own house now in advanced foreclosure. Through Jake, I learned they were telling extended family that I had stolen their retirement funds and fabricated identity theft claims to avoid financial responsibility. Few believed them, particularly after my Aunt Linda discovered evidence that they had used her recently deceased husband's personal information to apply for credit as well. One afternoon, I received an anonymous package containing printed emails between my parents and Kimberly, discussing plans to contest my will should my cancer prove terminal. The emails dated back to just weeks after my diagnosis, revealing they had been strategizing about my potential death while showing no interest in helping me survive. The sender had included a brief note. "You should know what they're planning. Not everyone in the family supports this." I forwarded the documents to Robert, who assured me my recently updated will and medical directives were legally sound and included specific provisions preventing challenges from family members who had demonstrated financial exploitation. As the holidays approached, I faced my first season without toxic family obligations. Instead of the usual charade of forced harmony and financial pressure, I accepted an invitation to join Brian's family for Thanksgiving. Seated at their table, surrounded by genuine warmth and care, I realized I wasn't missing anything by excluding my biological family. Rather, I had been missing this authentic connection my entire life by focusing my resources and energy on people who saw me only as a provider. By the 6-month mark of my financial separation plan, my family's attempts at contact had diminished significantly. The initial barrage of demands had given way to occasional guilt-inducing messages, which became increasingly infrequent as they accepted that their tactics were ineffective. They had found other ways to survive, other resources to exploit, other narratives to spin that preserved their self-image as victims rather than perpetrators. As my treatment cycle neared completion, I allowed myself to contemplate a future I hadn't dared imagine before, one where my resources supported my own dreams and needs, where relationships were reciprocal rather than extractive, and where my value wasn't measured by my usefulness to others. It was a future worth fighting for, worth surviving for. And for the first time in my adult life, it seemed within reach. 6 months after my last chemotherapy treatment, I sat in Dr. Reynolds' office receiving the news I had fought so hard for: complete remission. The aggressive lymphoma that had threatened my life was undetectable in my latest scans. While I would need regular monitoring for years to come, the immediate danger had passed. "I don't just treat cancer," Dr. Reynolds said, smiling as he closed my file. "I treat people with cancer. And sometimes, the non-medical changes patients make contribute significantly to their recovery. Your case will be one I reference when talking to other patients about the importance of reducing stress during treatment." I had moved into a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a fresh start that held no memories of family confrontations or sleepless nights worrying about their financial demands. The space was smaller than my previous house but felt infinitely more peaceful. I had furnished it simply but comfortably, prioritizing items that brought me joy rather than impressed others. My journey from family doormat to self-advocate hadn't been without emotional cost. There were still moments of doubt, particularly late at night when old patterns of guilt threatened to resurface. Had I been too harsh? Could there have been a middle ground? These questions would occasionally arise, only to be answered by remembering the evidence of their betrayal and the transformation in my health once I had established boundaries. 2 weeks after my remission news, a letter arrived from Kimberly. I recognized her handwriting immediately, though the return address was unfamiliar. After consulting with Dr. Mitchell, I decided to read it, curious about what she might say now that the restraining order had expired. The letter contained no apology or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Instead, it was filled with subtle accusations and revisionist history. "I don't understand how you could abandon your family during our financial crisis," she wrote. "After everything we did for you growing up, your selfishness has been shocking. Perhaps your illness warped your perspective, but the brother I knew would never have behaved this way." Dr. Mitchell helped me recognize the manipulation tactics throughout the letter: the Darvo technique, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, the selective memory, the complete omission of her "maybe dying will make you interesting" comment or any recognition of my medical needs during treatment. I decided not to respond, maintaining the no-contact boundary that had contributed so significantly to my recovery. The financial freedom resulting from my decision was remarkable. Without supporting my family, I saved over $5,000 monthly, funds now directed toward building my retirement, creating an emergency fund, and occasionally indulging in experiences rather than material possessions. My relationship with money transformed. Rather than viewing my income as a resource to solve other people's problems, I recognized it as a tool for creating security and opportunities in my own life. I began working with Diane on long-term financial planning, including setting aside funds for potential future medical needs. Therapy with Dr. Mitchell continued, focusing on establishing healthy relationship patterns and recognizing the warning signs of financial exploitation. The family dynamics you grew up with created a distorted sense of obligation, he explained. You were conditioned to believe your value lay in your utility to others. Breaking that pattern is like learning a new language as an adult, possible but requiring conscious effort and practice. Through a cancer survivors support group, I met Sarah, whose authentic interest in my thoughts and feelings rather than my usefulness was initially disorienting but ultimately healing. Our friendship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and reciprocity, concepts foreign to my previous relationships but now non-negotiable in my life. Inspired by my experience, I started an online support group for others dealing with financially abusive family members. The group grew quickly, revealing how common yet rarely discussed this form of exploitation is. Members shared strategies for establishing boundaries, legal resources for identity theft recovery, and emotional support for the guilt and grief that often accompany family estrangement. The first holiday season after achieving remission marked a profound milestone. I hosted a small gathering in my new apartment, surrounded by chosen family, Brian and Andrea, their extended family who had adopted me into their circle, several support group friends, and Sarah, whose presence brought a warmth I was still learning to accept as genuine rather than transactional. In January, nearly a year after my diagnosis, an unexpected email arrived from my parents. Unlike Kimberly's manipulative letter, this message contained something resembling acknowledgement, if not quite an apology. "We've had time to reflect on our relationship," they wrote. "While we still don't understand all your decisions, we recognize that our financial dependence created an unhealthy dynamic. We're managing on our own now and have found ways to support ourselves that don't involve you." I read the email several times, discussing it with Dr. Mitchell before deciding not to respond. The message stopped short of taking responsibility for identity theft, unauthorized credit cards, or their cruel reaction to my illness. It offered no questions about my health or recovery. Most tellingly, it concluded with, "We hope someday you'll be ready to have us in your life again," revealing their continued focus on their desires rather than my well-being. The deeper life lesson emerged gradually. My worth had never been connected to my usefulness to others. The family dynamics that had defined my value exclusively through financial provision had nearly cost me my life, both literally through the stress impacting my cancer treatment and figuratively through the depletion of resources needed for my medical care. Standing up to my family hadn't just saved my finances, it had saved my life. Dr. Reynolds confirmed this clinical reality during my one-year follow-up appointment. "The improvement in your blood work after reducing your stress levels was remarkable," he noted. "There's growing research on the connection between chronic stress and cancer outcomes. In your case, the correlation was dramatic." My new purpose extended beyond personal recovery. The support group I had started helped others recognize and escape financial abuse, creating a community where experiences often dismissed or minimized were validated and addressed. Members frequently reported health improvements after establishing boundaries, reinforcing the connection between financial exploitation and physical well-being. Rather than being defined by family obligation or usefulness, I discovered meaning in authentic connection, personal growth, and helping others navigate situations similar to mine. My identity expanded beyond provider, beyond cancer patient, into a person with inherent worth independent of what I could do for others. The journey continues, with occasional setbacks and moments of doubt balanced by increasing confidence in my choices and boundaries. I've learned that family can be chosen, that health requires protecting both body and boundaries, and that sometimes the most loving act toward yourself and others is saying no to exploitation. If you've stayed with my story until now, I hope it helps you recognize any similar patterns in your own life. Have you ever found yourself consistently prioritizing others' needs at the expense of your own well-being? What boundaries might you need to establish for your own health and future? Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. If you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey, please share it with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, Your worth isn't measured by your usefulness to others, but by the love and respect you show yourself.